Hello, everyone. How are you? Hope you're doing well. Welcome to this webinar on behalf of the TEFL org. My name is Carl. I'm going to be your host. This is a live webinar. It's a Wednesday afternoon here in the UK. I'm currently in Northern Ireland. I work as an EFL trainer, so I help people to become EFL teachers. I work as an online teacher, a stroke tutor to my own students. I also do some EFL examining. I do that face-to-face, and I also do that online. So if this is the sort of thing you're interested in, hopefully you're in the right place. As I said, we are live, so wherever you are, do say hello. I'm in Belfast, Northern Ireland. I can see Jennifer's already saying hello. Hello, Jennifer in the Republic. Whereabouts in the Republic are you? Are you close to Belfast anywhere? Raminda, hi. Let all the hellos come in. I won't read them all out. We'll be here all day. Now, as I said, this is a live Q&A. So basically, if you have any questions at all, please do put them in the comment section. They come up on my screen if you're on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, however you're watching us. And the topic of today's webinar is about creating an effective one-to-one syllabus, which is one of my favorite topics because it's how I started teaching online sort of about 8 years ago, where I started to find my own students. And, you know, I do mostly one-on-one teaching when I do my online teaching. I do the odd sort of 2 or 3. And if I go work for a company, I quite often do big groups, but the students I find myself tend to be one-on-one, and that's the kind of thing that they want and they're quite happy to do. So I quite like to talk about this. But as I said, if you've got any questions, put them in the comments. They will come up on my screen. We've got someone in from London, Chicago, Lincolnshire, Switzerland, Guernsey, and also I think that's Arizona. Is it Rick Messer? AZ, yes, I'm not so great with the abbreviations of American states. Anyway, let's get on to it. So creating an effective one-to-one syllabus. Well, what will I cover for the next sort of 20 minutes in this presentation? First of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about what one-to-one teaching is, how to assess a learner. So you've got a learner in front of you. How do you sort of get their abilities? How do you sort of decide what you need to teach? How to structure a syllabus. So, you know, sort of how to create little parts of a syllabus to come together. How to select materials. So either creating your own or finding your own or finding some other people's, how to make the lessons communicative, because that's quite a big part and sometimes a bit of a problem with one-to-one lessons. And how to test the lesson's effectiveness. So basically what that means is making sure that what you're teaching is actually working and is actually improving the student. Okay. And then afterwards we'll have a Q&A. I will answer any sort of questions you have at all about teaching English as a foreign language. Right. So what is one-to-one teaching? So generally it is seen as one teacher to one student. Now, a lot of this happens online, but not always online. When I worked in Japan, I worked for a company that found students. It was like a language school. They had one-to-one students and that student wanted a teacher, and the company would pay me to go and teach the one-to-one. So it's not always online, but a big chunk of it is. Please do put in the chat whether you're looking to do this online or face-to-face. The other thing I would say is that quite often, don't limit yourself to online. So even though here in Northern Ireland, I do online teaching where I go, I Zoom to people in China, India, South America, wherever it is, all over the place. But I've also done one-to-one teaching here face-to-face, where I've gone and met them in a coffee shop or around their house. Now it has been widened a little bit. So some people sort of say it also includes 1 to 2 or 1 to 3. I think any more than that, you're sort of talking about group teaching myself, but it does sort of include that sort of thing. And usually the student has specific goals. So quite often, again, not always, but I'd say the majority of times, a student chooses to have a one-on-one teacher because they've got something in mind that they want to specifically do. So that could be like passing an exam. That could be improving one of the skills. It could be something to do with business English, which they want to learn in order to improve their work prospects, something like that. And one of the things I quite like about this is that the teacher can personalize the lessons to the student's goal and the student's interest. So I've been teaching for sort of 20 odd, well, not 20 odd, coming up to 20 years. And I like it when a student has a different goal that I've not thought of, or a goal, they come to me and say, I need to improve this. Or they sort of say, do you know what, I'm quite interested in, let's say, English music, and I'd love you to teach me a bit about English music. I do sometimes get things like that. And also the teacher can adjust the pace and the content almost immediately. So quite often I go off on tangents. Quite often I start teaching something, they get it very quickly. So I have to get through that lesson quickly, because if not, they'll get bored. Or sometimes I'll start teaching something and they struggling with it. So I have to slow it down, have to sort of do it a different way, have to think of some other activities. And I quite like that sort of thing. And I think that keeps you on your toes. And I think it is really good way to learn how to teach through one-to-one teaching. Also, a great way about one-to-one teaching is you can gain trust between the two of you. They can trust you to get them to their goal, but you can also quite often get really good rapport. Some of the students that I've had the best connections with have been one-to-one students, as opposed to being in a group where you have to sort of look after lots of different students. Now, saying that, I have also had some one-to-ones that are pretty tough going. It's not always easy. It's not always quick. It's not always effective to do one-to-one. The student has to give quite a lot as well. Also, as a teacher, you have to give quite a lot, because there's sort of no hiding in one-to-ones. Whereas in a group, quite often you can put them in groups and they do a little task, and then you'll sort of just give yourself a minute at the back of the classroom just to think. One-on-one, it can be a little bit more difficult to do that if you don't have a student that's willing to work hard. Right, so what happens when a student contacts me? And I'm not going to talk about the sort of money side of things, the business side of things. I've done webinars where I talk about that, but I'm going to talk more about the academic side of things. The first thing before you make your syllabus for this one-to-one student is you have to start to assess the learner. You need to work out what that student's needs are, what their lacks are, and what their wants are. Now, these are three different things. They overlap, but they are quite different. They are three different sort of headings in a table you'd have to write, or on, bullet points you might write on a Word document or something. Right. So needs. So this is what the student needs to get the goals. So, for example, they come to you and they say, I want to pass the Cambridge Advanced English test. Okay. So what they will need is to hit the criteria of the Cambridge Advanced English test. That's really what they need. Okay. A different example I might give was a student might say, I want to be able to write effective Facebook posts to sell my products. So what do they need? They need the language around marketing. They need the punctuation around marketing. They need social media sort of English. That's what they will need. Okay. But this is different from lacks. So this is what the student can't do at the moment to get to the goal. Basically, why are they coming to you? Now, the Cambridge English, they might have really good writing, for example, but they can't get the speaking because their punctuation is bad, because their grammatical speaking is bad. This is what they lack. With the business English, they might not have the vocabulary needed. You would have to teach the vocabulary. They lack the vocabulary. So basically what they need, and then what don't they have in order to get to this need. Okay. Now the needs could be quite broad, and they might already have some of those needs, but the lacks will be things that they don't have. So, with the Cambridge test, they might need to pass the reading, the writing, the listening, and the speaking. They might already be great at reading, might already be great at listening. So they don't lack that, but they still need it. And then finally, and this can be a little bit tricky, is the wants. This is what the student wants to do in the lessons. And sometimes this is not what they need, and sometimes this is not what they lack. So for example, they might say, I need lots of speaking practice. I want lots of speaking practice. In this lesson, I want to do lots of speaking practice. However, you might decide, okay, actually their speaking's not as bad. They're just not very confident with it. But really, what they're really bad at is writing. They think they're good at writing, but what they are actually bad at is writing. So they lack the writing skills, but they need the writing skills, but they want speaking skills. Now, you've got to use your confidence, you've got to use your planning to make sure that they definitely hit all these needs through looking at the lacks and maybe the wants. Now, the problem is if you're doing one-on-one, you've got to keep they want these. And if they don't get these in the lesson, they feel like they're wasting their time. But actually, your job is to convince them actually they're quite good at speaking. What they do is they lack this. Okay. Hope that makes sense. Please do put in the chat. I'm loving all the hellos. Jennifer, you're in Galway, beautiful part of the world. I do some teacher training down there sometimes. Right, so create a needs analysis. So you've got these wants, you've got these needs, you've got these lacks. Right, so basically what you need to do is look at their current language levels for the different skills. So you need to check they come to you, and I'm going to tell you a bit in a minute how to find out what their language levels are. They've come to you, you've sort of found out what their needs are. You've definitely you found out what their wants are, but their lacks is where you sort of have to get the needs analysis going. So you have to look at the current language levels for the different skills. Is their speaking good? Is their writing bad? Listening, same, listening and reading. Okay. But within that, you've got to work out whether they have the language level to get those needs. Because the thing they want, their need might be really high, might be really difficult, and their language levels might be quite low. Okay. So you have to sort of look at their language level compared to what they need. Look at the goals the students have. So look at the student, look at their goal, and decide what you need to improve to get up to that goal. Now, how do you do this? So there's different ways, and I'll go into more detail in this bit, but basically seen as the most typical ones are to do an interview with them. Now, as you interview them, you can find out their wants, you can find out their needs, and you can start to sort of understand their lacks. The other thing is you could do a questionnaire where you sort of just send out a Google form, something like that, and they have to fill it in, and then from that you can find out what their wants, needs, and lacks are, and you can start look at their grammar, their vocabulary, that kind of thing. Now, what's the problem with this? It's harder with just doing an interview or a questionnaire to get reading, to get listening. It can also be a little bit difficult to measure someone's speaking just on a minute or two from talking to them. But this is where you've got to start to form the needs analysis. Then what you need, and if you Google these, you'll find these are diagnostic tests. So this is a test. You give them a reading test. You don't have to sit in front of them. They can do it at home on their own. You then mark it. You can decide on their reading level. Same with listening. Okay, you can do a listening test like that. Now, diagnostic test, you could, for example, get the Cambridge marking criteria, which is downloadable, and you can see, does the speaking they're giving you, does that actually match the criteria? Are they there or are they right down here? Thanks for the questions. I will definitely get to the questions at the end. Right, so how to then assess the student. So basically, in a questionnaire, you might ask open-ended questions, and you've got to try and do it in a relaxed way, because the first time you meet someone, it's always a bit stressful. Now, how can you do this? You can do this by sending them the questions. They record them. They send them to you. I've done that before. If you are available to do like a 10-minute, 20-minute needs analysis with them at the start, you can have your questions written down. You write down their answers. Got to try and do it smiley, try and do it nice. Don't make it like an interview. Make them free to be talking. Don't ask them questions where they need to just answer yes, no. Get those whys in. Get those hows in, that kind of thing. Give them a test linked to their needs. So make sure that you're sort of, if you're testing them against the Cambridge exam, make sure that you'll test them a little bit about what will be asked in the Cambridge exam. There's no point if they only want to pass a Cambridge exam, you're asking them business English questions, not generally going to work. You've got to somehow give them some sort of test where you can grade them for each of the skills compared to their needs and their goals. So what sort of thing? Now, these are the sort of things you can Google. Okay, you want something like a placement test, speaking test, or you can do it by getting writing or speech samples. So get these kind of things so you can either listen to them again, read them again, and then you're starting to see, right, their grammar's bad, their pronunciation's bad, or look, their vocabulary's bad. Look, they're not getting these listening questions correct. You're starting to get an overview of the student. Doesn't always have to be negative. You can say, oh, look, their grammar use is fantastic. Don't need to teach much grammar in this course. Very key that you identify the positive and the negative areas. As I just said, don't just go for the negative things, because if you've got their positive stuff, you don't need to teach their positive stuff. And that can save you time. It can make them feel more confident, and it can improve the things that they actually lack. So what sort of things might you include in the questionnaire? You'd sort of say to the question, ask some questions, what they feel their needs are. So what do you want to get from this course? What do you need at the end of this course? What do you need to study in terms of the future afterwards? Thinking about sort of long-term or short or medium to long-term, what they need. Then wants, do you want speaking practice? Do you want grammar practice? Do you want vocabulary practice? What kind of wants do you want? And then you can sort of do these in sort of numbering them. So you could have the 4 skills, and they number 1, they want the most, 2, they want speaking, 3, they want listening, 4, they want writing, whatever it might be. Right. Then you can ask them what their lacks are. So what do you think your weaknesses are? Okay. You can also ask them what their strengths are, but they might say fluency. Okay, fine. And then you have to maybe get in the first couple of lessons in fluency, and then they will, if you think their fluency is actually better than they want, you go away from the fluency. Right. You've really got to be prepared with one-on-one students to change your mind about their ability. Don't judge them just from that first 5-10 minutes that you do, because after 1 lesson or 2 lessons, you might realize, actually, do you know what? Their grammar is a lot worse than I thought it was. And then you go from there. You have to put in more grammar stuff into the syllabus. Right. Set the objective of the time that you're going to spend with them. Now, at the start with one-on-ones, you might not know how long you're going to have them, but you've got to have an objective, a final part the final goal that you then aim for through your teaching and through the writing of the syllabus. Always keep the end in mind with every sort of lesson you teach. Right. So it's a bit of a cliche hearing this SMART thing. You'll get this sort of thing up when you do practice job interviews, but SMART goals, I think, tends to work. Right. So what goal do they have? What goal do you have for them as a whole? For example, it might be organizing an essay. So their large goal might be to organize an essay coherently and cohesively. All right. That might be the large goal that you're aiming for. But you're not going to do that in 1 lesson. So what you might start with is a small specific goal, which would be to learn how to paragraph. So you might think in the syllabus, right, they need to organize an essay to pass their final goal. They need to organize an essay to pass the Cambridge exam. However, they can't do paragraphs. So I'm going to do a small goal, a small lesson about learning how to paragraph. Okay, and you're going to teach them an hour lesson, 2-hour lesson, whatever it might be, on paragraphing. Right, measurable. So then you've got to sort of check how they are reaching the goals. So you could see from their first thing that the first diagnostic test you did with them, there were no paragraphs, or their paragraphs didn't make any sense. You can see after the first lesson or the second lesson, they've given you a bit of homework, and you can see that they can freely write paragraphing. It's measurable. Achievable. How long do they have to do this? So, if they say they need to learn how to organize an essay within half an hour, if their English ability is up there, it might be possible. But if their English ability is quite far down, it's not really going to be achievable in that half an hour. And you've got to be honest with them. Also, their ability. If they say, I need to pass Cambridge Advanced, but they're down here just doing the Cambridge lower levels, it's going to take a long time, but also they haven't got the ability at the moment to do it. And you've got to sort of say to them, look, A teacher might say to you, I can get you through this Cambridge exam, but I think you need a lot longer. It's also got to be relevant. Everything has to be linked to the goal. So if their goal is to pass the Cambridge exam, and you're giving them a little lesson on football or a little lesson on music, is that linked? No, it's not. Okay, so everything you do in the classroom should sort of be smart, and every lesson you plan should try and be smart. And then have different short and different long achievable milestones in time. So within 10 weeks, 10 lessons, yes, you might be able to get them up to Cambridge Advanced. But short term, you've got to say, right, okay, look, you're going to be able to do paragraphs by the end of the first lesson, whatever it might be. Right. And then you use these SMART goals, as in the the specific ones, the large ones and the small ones. You use these to sort of make a framework to write the syllabus. So first goal, organize essays. And then within that, you'll have paragraphing. You might even have underneath that topic sentences. Within the paragraphs, you might have body paragraphs. How to write a body paragraph is different from how to write a conclusion. And these will be different frames, different boxes within your syllabus. And these should be modular and skills based. So what do I mean by this? So basically, themes, first of all, is sort of the topics that might be covered. So you could have a module, you'd have a frame where you're going to talk to them about organizing paragraphs within the topic of healthcare. Now, again, this would be different if it's business English. It might be the topic of marketing. So within the topics, now, if it's low levels, if it's kids, it might be within just some vocabulary of animals. Okay. So you're thinking about a topic that might be on the exam or might be in their final goal, and you're doing lessons around it. The skills. So what sort of reading skills, listening skills, writing or speaking do they need to reach their goal? And you try and link those together. So you do a healthcare topic, and within that, you'll do some lessons on paragraph organizing. And within that, you might do some reading practice on healthcare. You might do some speaking practice on healthcare. The topics and the skills come together to make your framework. And that would be a box. First box, they need paragraphing. Let's do a box on paragraphing. The topic's going to be education. The skills they're going to use are writing. And then you create a lesson template for each module for each box, basically for each frame. Yeah. Hope that makes sense. Please let me know if I am not making sense. If you agree or you disagree, also please do put that in the chat. Then this is an important thing. You need to create an assessment for each module. Now, this doesn't have to be a sit-down exam. It's somehow how you can look at the frame, look at the module and say, okay, yes, look, they can do that because they've produced this piece of paper that I printed. If they've sent it to you by email, if you're face-to-face, this piece of paper that they've written shows me that they can now write me a well-organized essay on healthcare. If they can do that, great. Now, you can do it with a reading test and a listening test as well, but you've got to be able to assess that you are doing a good job. Right. So you've sort of said, right, okay, they need to do something on paragraphing or how to organize essays. How do you get the materials to do it? Now, this is why I always say, if you're teaching one-on-one and you're getting your own students, it's important to try and have a niche where you don't have to create lots and lots of materials. If a student comes to you and says, I want to pass the Cambridge exam, and you write a load of materials for the Cambridge exam, and then another student comes to you and says, I need to pass the Duolingo exam, you then have to write a load of materials for the Duolingo exam. It's really good to be known as Carl, the Duolingo English teacher, for example, because then once you've written the materials, you can use them over and over again. You're not constantly writing your own materials. But when you're one-on-one, you have to think about the materials that meet the goals. So really creating your own and through using your own training. For example, here on our course at TEFL.org, we will teach you how to make a lesson, how to get materials. Now, what do you need? You need to find authentic materials. So you need to find sort of authentic writing questions. You need to find reading texts that will be used. So if it's a kids class, some sort of maybe like kids basic story. If it's a listening, if it's a business English listening, can you find some sort of business English listening text on YouTube, or I don't know, an Audible, or a book, something like that? Can you use those to get it on a news story? Use authentic materials that are going to help them. Don't try and create your own materials. Now, you might create your own lesson from the materials, but don't try and make your own materials unless you know they are authentic. Then you create the exercises. You create the speaking, the listening, the writing exercises from it. Again, this is something that you would learn on your training. Now, the other way to do it is to use existing materials. So find a textbook that will help your student reach their goal. You've got to check the copyright. Now, the textbook might be perfect for them. So you just maybe do a bit of text, you get a PDF, or you somehow put it on digitally. You can buy the digital textbooks and you can create the material. You can use these materials to reach their goals. Fantastic. Textbooks work well. They're never perfect. There's not a perfect textbook, because if you've got a one-on-one student, the textbook will be written generally for the whole world. It wouldn't take in the lacks of your specific student. Websites, textbooks are really the best way to go, Googling basically. And then you can adapt any materials you find to the lacks of the students. Their grammar's bad. Hopefully it might be in the textbook. If not, you've got to write your own lesson about their grammar, or you might need to just take this and do extra work on a specific point of grammar. Right. Keep the lessons communicative and put this in your syllabus. In one-on-ones, it can be quite hard if you've got a quiet student, especially, to keep the communicative lessons going. But you really do have to keep this in mind by doing communicative exercises. So think about tasks that they talk through. So they've always got to be speaking, basically. Yeah. Now, obviously, if they're doing a bit of writing or reading or listening, they have to shut up for a bit. But when they're doing their writing, they need to plan it a bit. And if you can get them to speak while they're doing that, that will help them to get to their goal. So you put a task in front of them. You then give them say, look, read this, and in a couple of minutes, I'll ask you how you're going to do this. You then work through it together. You talk through it. And then use effective and positive error correction. So basically, you've got to make sure that when they are speaking, you're correcting them in a positive way. Now, I've done webinars where I talk solely about error correction. Don't become a one-on-one teacher where you're correcting every error in a bad, negative way. You'll lose a student like that. They will go into their shell. They won't talk so much. Make sure that your error correction for writing and for speaking is positive. Encourage them to be a bit active in the class. Put that in your lesson plan. Put that in your syllabus. Encourage them to be writing on the shared whiteboard if you're doing it online. Encourage them to have a little walk around if they can while they're thinking. Encourage them to be a bit active if you're doing it one-on-one. Right, so how do you assess that your lessons are working effectively? You have to assess the student and you put this in your syllabus by saying, okay, they can now do this. They can't do this. Or this new lack has come up, or this lack has finished. And I can tell you that because look at this piece of work or this test I've given them. But you also need to assess yourself. Is what I'm doing a good way of teaching? Assess whether they have achieved their goals, those smart short-term or longer-term goals. If they have done that, then you've done your job. They will hopefully take you on for more lessons. They will give you good reviews, whatever it might be. So different ways of doing this. You can keep a digital folder of their work. So every time they write an essay, every time they do some sort of activity, you keep it in a digital folder, and then you can show them the progression. You can see how that they have increased, and you can see how they have assessed. You've assessed them to reach their goals. You can give them quizzes. You can give them practice tests that you've created just to show, reading tests, listening tests. If it's kids, you can give them like a little worksheet which covers the vocabulary you've covered. They have to do connections between the vocabulary, all those sort of things. Just, it doesn't have to be a proper sit-down test. You don't even have to tell them it's a test, but you can see that it's a sort of a test that you're testing their ability. Reflective exercises. So you can ask them, what have you learned? How do you think you have improved? What do you still think you need to do? This isn't at the start. This is as you're going through the course, and you're putting these into your syllabus. So you know after week 2, after lesson 2, you're going to do this. You're going to give them a little questionnaire to see what they think they've improved. Right, I'm going to get to the questions, the slide after this. So please do get any questions in that you might have. Right. Flexible is very important. When you first get the student, you might not have that syllabus completely written for them in the first week of meeting them, but you will have what their final goals are. You know what you've got to cover in the first 2 lessons. And then if they do that quickly, if they do that slowly, or if you think a new lack has appeared, you've got to be flexible with it. So your syllabus might change in week 3 and week 4, and communicate this with them. Yeah, you could. I've done shared documents where I've done the syllabus, where I've shown them what's going to come up in the next few weeks, and they can see exactly what's going on. Now, remember, you are the expert. Sometimes with one-on-ones, the student can think that they are the expert, and they think that your teaching is not good, or they think that what you're teaching them isn't actually helping them to meet their goals. Explain to them, you need to do this because of this. You lack this, or you need this. You are the expert. Keep that in mind. AI and internet searches has made it quite easy to make syllabuses. So you can put into ChatGPT, create me an EFL syllabus to pass IELTS 7.5, whatever it might be. It will create it for you, and then you might adapt it. There will be syllabuses out there that people have already written. And this can be for kids. This can also be for low levels, general English. This could be business English. There's lots of stuff out there to help you, and then you might adapt it. Now, once you've done this once, it becomes a lot easier. The first few times of making a syllabus is tricky. You don't know what you're going to get. Basically work from the end goal, and then think step by step what they need to do that. Once you've got that syllabus, the next student that comes to you, if they come to you for the same type of course, it's a lot easier. Be communicative with the student. Make sure you're speaking to them all the time. Make sure they are having a chance to speak. Make sure you're communicating what you're doing and why you're doing it as well. I think that really helps with one-on-ones. Don't overpromise. If they come in and they've taken the IELTS test, for example, 8 times, and the maximum they've ever got is 5.5, they then come to you because they need 7. Don't say, yeah, I can get you to 7 within 6 months. You're not gonna, long term, that's not gonna help. All right, they're gonna give you bad reviews. They're not gonna tell their friends. You're gonna find out that they're right comments. Just say to them, look, you've failed this 8 times. It's gonna be difficult. I'm not quite sure how long it's going to go, but let's give it a go and let's see where we are in a month, 2 months. Okay. Don't overpromise, don't underdeliver. So always keep that goal in mind and make sure that you are delivering towards that goal. Don't just, if you found a nice little lesson that you think, oh, they'll enjoy this, if it's not hitting their goal, is it worth it? Okay. So if you've got any questions, please do put them in chat. Now, this can be about one-to-one teaching. It can be about TEFL in general. If you aren't watching this live, you can drop the questions in the comments and we will answer them. Someone from the TEFL team will answer them. Or you can go to TEFL.org. That should be TEFL.org. Sorry. Let me just share my screen. I've written the wrong one there. TEFL.org. If you go to that website, then you can send us through a message on that. You can contact us through that. There's also lots of stuff on there. I'm sorry, it's definitely TEFL.org, not TEFL.com. Right. Let me get some questions. All the hellos there. Hi, Jennifer. Hi, Raminda. Hi, Charles. Hi, David. Rock, Rose, and the Thistle. Hello. Hi, Rick, Jennifer, Ballpark. Hello. All the hellos are coming in. Right, Julie, what would be included in a questionnaire? So you ask them what they need, and they will probably come with something quite general, such as speaking practice. They might say something just like to pass IELTS. Not really helpful. You need to know what IELTS grade it is. You need to know what they need in each of the skills. So if you're doing the questionnaire sort of spoken wise, you can then adapt it. You can then say, okay, right, you then need this, you then need that. You could also include things like what they want. Yeah. And again, this can be sort of things like, I want speaking practice. It's not overly helpful. You know, you can sort of then ask some questions. Do you want grammar practice? Do you want vocabulary practice? Do you want to learn about any specific vocabulary? That kind of thing you can ask them in the questionnaire. Rock, Rose and the Thistle, hello. How would I approach teaching someone who's completely new to English? Where do you start? Right. So I've done webinars where I talk about beginners. So watch that webinar. Okay. Right. It's very, very, very rare to have someone with absolute zero English. All right. There is basically most of the world will have had some sort of English lessons at school. Okay. Every country generally teaches some English lessons. All right. So when you have got, if they say, they might send you an email or something like that in their own language. All right. But you'd be surprised. They can say hello. Yeah. They can probably say a phrase like, my name is. And then what you actually do is you build up on that. Okay, so you sort of say, okay, you can say my name is. Oh, well done. You can then teach sort of individual words, countries, and then you teach them basic phrases. You can give them a phrase such as I come from, and then wherever it is, and you build up on each one. Now, if they absolutely have zero English, and that sometimes is a case with refugees. I've taught people here in Northern Ireland who have zero English. They can't read or write in their own language, or they didn't have any schooling in their own country, right? Now, if they have got that, you've got to have lots of pictures. You've got to have these basic survival phrases that you teach them. And you can use Translate, absolutely fine, to get through those first lessons, and then you build up on top of that. Okay. Has that answered your question, Rock, Rose, or the Thistle? I hope it has. Now we've got a question that someone sent in. Hi, Matthew. Quite a long question. I'm going to read this out. Okay, so it's also a thought. Getting a detailed brief from learners concerning their objectives is crucial. Yes. You need to, if they come to you and they just say, I want to learn English, it's really not very helpful. Where do you start with that? You've got to find out what their specific goal is, and then you have to go with exactly what they need. And now Matthew's question is balancing what learners want with what you as a tutor think they need. Right. So if a student says, I only want conversational practice and taking different learning styles into account, is it something to me to supplement that with a limited amount of reading and writing nonetheless? Right. If quite often you get this. If a student says, I just want speaking practice, fine. But think about sort of how you converse with your friends. Okay. Now, yes, you might sort of say to them, how are you? You know, how's your work going? How's the family? That sort of thing. But, you know, eventually you sort of start talking about other different topics, don't you, when you're talking to your friends, you know, and it might be superficial stuff like football, music. Yeah. But you're sort of giving opinions on that. Yeah. Everything sort of comes from a little bit of reading or a little bit of listening. And I think it's perfectly fine when someone says they want conversational practice to say, right, we're going to listen to this for 5 minutes. Then afterwards, we're going to have a conversation about it. Now, writing is different. If you're making them write something and they don't want writing, it's a bit tricky. But what you could sort of again do is write down a little bit of notes as you listen, or you could get them to answer some questions as they listen and then have some opinions. Same with reading. You can say, right, here, look, here's this news article I found. We're going to read it for 5 minutes, then we're going to have a conversation about it. I think that is absolutely fine, because having a conversational practice, if a student says to you, I want a conversational class, it's very, very tricky to keep a conversation going for an hour. You think with your friends, you sit there like this, speaking to someone for an hour, you're going to sort of have lulls in the conversation. You're going to have ups in the conversation. I tend to, if a student says to me, I only want conversation practice, I tend to not really take them on. I don't really like doing them. If I do them, I limit them to sort of half an hour. Anything more than that, you're really, really struggling. Okay. Garusa, hi. This is an interesting one. Do I have any tips for the TOEFL test? Right. Look, the TEFL org helps people to become teachers. It doesn't help people. It doesn't help students to pass. Basically, there are tons of websites out there to help with the TOEFL test. Okay. You need to find a teacher who will teach you the TOEFL test. That's not my job. I will help a teacher to teach the TOEFL test. Okay. I think that's all the questions. Is it yes? Unless anyone's got any more. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you found it useful. Okay. So basically, one-on-one teaching, I would go and look at my webinars about how to find students, how to effectively use technology. I've done all this. If you go on our YouTube page, you'll be able to find this information. Go to TEFL.org and then find the information on there. Do a little search. You'll find information on our blog pages. If you go to our YouTube page at TEFL.org, you will also find information on there. Thank you very much for paying attention. We do have a Facebook group. It's worth going on that to see if anybody can answer their questions. You know, quite often I see people on there who say, look, I've got to write a syllabus for this. Can anyone help me? That sort of thing you can find on that. Yeah. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. Bye-bye.